Script.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, yes.
Now it's in progress. Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope it's morning for everyone there, or good afternoon. We are really happy to see you on our online consultations hosted by GGKP and dedicated to outreach, stakeholders engagement, and public awareness raising in connection with national implementation plans. These consultations are arranged as a part of outreach assistance to the countries, which should be provided by GGKP in the GEF 10785 project. And furthermore, GGKP is developing 6 regional outreach strategies, which countries would be able to practically use. And if they find it necessary, they would be able to integrate this part of these strategies or some activities into their action plans when developing and implementing their NIPs and planning their outreach activities to raise awareness on POPs and improve collaboration with the private sector when collecting the data and when developing the inventories on POPs. During this consultation, we would be able to share the status of current work and strategy development and the schedule. We would run a couple of surveys to collect inputs from representatives of the countries, from our participants, and we would like to have a discussion about current challenges in the outreach and stakeholders engagement, existing practices, and if you have any successful cases or successful practices, or maybe just practices you would like to share with us, we'd be really happy to hear from you. This event shall be conducted with the participation of Bahamas, Bolivia, Dominica, Peru, and Uruguay. We also have the representatives of regional executing agencies from Uruguay and from Trinidad and Tobago. We are recording this consultation, but we'll later circulate the meeting minutes and summaries to all the participants. So the event will be hosted in English language, but we do provide simultaneous interpretation to Spanish. So please feel free to click the button which looks like a globe in the bottom of your screen and select the Spanish language if you require Spanish interpretation. And upon with our consultations with regional centers and the following countries, we have been informed that some of the countries and some relevant stakeholders would like to share their experience and practices, so we'd be really happy to hear. So far, we know it would be our colleagues from Peru and Bahamas, but if you would like to add something, please feel free during the discussion, raise your hand and feel free to join the discussion. So it's a great honor for us to meet all of you in an online meeting. It's, I would say, the first time to see people from the countries, not in the webinar, so it would be a great opportunity for us to hear from you and engage in the conversation. My colleague Stephanie Vidarini, who is communications coordinator, she leads on the outreach strategy effort for the countries, and she would lead the main session today. And before we start, I would like to give floor to Ms. Carla Valle-Clan, the program officer from BRS Secretariat, to open this session with a couple of remarks on the outreach and information dissemination for development of NIPs and management of POPs on behalf of the convention. So the floor is yours, Carla.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Buenos dias. I recognize a few names: Hola, Natalia, Belen, and Cecilia. The others, I'm not sure if I don't recognize the names or if I don't really know them. So I'm Carla Valle-Clan from the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I have been working here for a while, so I may have met you in the context of national reporting on the Article 15 or the Basel Convention as well. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much, Anastasia, to include us. Yeah, we were discussing the importance of the participation of stakeholders and in this process of updating the NIPs or initiating the NIPs for new parties. I think the majority here is probably doing already updates. And that was what the point that I would like to stress here today in my opening remarks. As we all know, this convention is a very important one. but it's also very difficult to implement. And it's very important that the governments engage with their national stakeholders in the implementation of the convention to achieve the results or the objectives of what the convention is aiming at. And without doing that, it's very difficult to do. Doing that is already difficult to do. So without it, it's even worse. So what we would like to stress here from this point of view is that you have a chance in your hands to do important work, and it would be great if you could, in doing so, engage with the relevant stakeholders, for example, NGOs and the private sector and academic institutions and any other institution that's relevant in your government. So because because of the complexity of the convention, you need to understand the impacts on the positive side or negative side of doing certain actions or taking certain measures or changing legislation and or collecting data and so on. So having a group at the national level that can voice their concerns and how they will have either difficulties or possibilities to fulfill the compliance committees, the compliance commitments that they may have with you is one thing. And the other is for you as government authorities to actually inform them of what is needed and the changes in behavior and the changes, even in certain cases, even in the production of certain articles and or items that we consume. So from that point of view, we think this is an important aspect for you to consider. And I'm new to the NIPS universe, not new to the conventions, but have been starting to work with my colleague Suman, and he asked me to be here today. And Suma has been following the NIPS for many years. And we were discussing which guidance would be more useful for you in this case, for you to be familiarized with, if you are not yet. There is one called the Guidance on Social and Economic Assessments for the National Implementation Plans under the Convention, which contains a lot of guidance on what kind of stakeholder you should involve when. And basically the answer is as many as you can, which are relevant to the field, but when would be throughout the implementation of the convention, especially in the NIPS related activities. Also because for that you also have some resources normally provided by the JEF and other sources of funds. So it's a great opportunity.
Fuentes, entonces es una muy buena oportunidad de
In case you have not, it's a nice document to read, not too long, from 2017. It's available on the website. And I think my colleagues who are here will talk about the other aspects, as Anastasia mentioned, the importance also of involving the public, and doing public awareness activities and educating our populations about what's happening, but also the sectors that are involved in the implementation of the convention. So I wish you a good webinar, and if you need any help, Anastasia can provide you with our email addresses here in the Secretariat, and I'm happy to help. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay long in this webinar, but I'm happy to bilaterally talk to any of you if you need. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. And now I think my colleague Stephanie Widerini will join with a quick presentation, and we will continue with some polls and questions and answers. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Anastasia. I hope you can see the full screen of the slides at this time. And welcome to all our colleagues from Group 2, from the Bahamas, Bolivia, Dominica, Peru, and Uruguay. I hope we have representatives from each one of you. We really appreciate your presence today. And this opportunity will give us a chance for hearing a little bit more from you, for your insights, for your experience and some challenges, some difficulties, or even some smooth sailing in navigating around engagement with the relevant stakeholders during the process of NIPS update and development of action plan, during the review, and even before that in the preparation on the action plan. So we've got a few slides here before we dive into the dialogue across different countries. So today we will have a bit of an overview of the outreach and stakeholder engagement. We will have a discussion on envision consultation process that we're running. So we have 3 sessions in total that we're running this week. We have 3 groups decided based on the very convenient time zone as per countries. And during the discussion, we would like to gather inputs from you so that we can plan, especially on building the strategy document on outreach and stakeholder engagement as part of the effort to support the NIPS update for all countries. So we are from Component 4, GGKP is supporting in creating and establishing the strategy document, following the guidance, draft guidance that we had a chance to circulate just a couple of months ago. And we would like to thank you for your feedback and your positive review. So we would be able to also circulate that in the coming months. So the next step will be strategizing for all the steps for the NIPS update. So not just the guidance on the inventory and data collection, but it will be beyond that. And we will also coordinate inputs and ideas from everyone. We will circulate the meeting minutes today, and we will show you the timeline, the expected outputs after that. So what are the objectives of today's session? First of all, we have the consultation with the project countries to receive your inputs and contribution, some insights, as I mentioned, from your country's perspective, and to gather information relevant to your national context, particularly in terms of mapping and facilitating engagement with all stakeholders that you intend to engage during the process of the NIPS update on the preparation of the action plan and the development of it. And secondly, baseline assessment and improvement to review and assess how the current state of your outreach and information dissemination for POPs that can be enhanced to help countries and regions comply with their obligation as per Stockholm Convention. And then also, of course, as part of this second objective, we would like to implement building and enhancing human capacities. The last point on the objectives of today's session is opportunity for all of us, peer-to-peer sharing, to facilitate the lesson learned and challenges encountered and good practices in outreach and information dissemination acquired by each country, as well as the regional executing agencies who are supporting on behalf of the Stockholm Convention as well. So this is the timeline that we expect to deliver. First of all, we have drafted the outline for the strategy that we will show you the skeleton in a moment. The document of the outline is prepared by July, and this month we will run the consultation with all parties. In August, we will also circulate the meeting minutes with the conclusion of what we've gathered in terms of your inputs. Then we invite countries to share their best practices from all these project countries to be collected as illustration and to be included in the strategy document. So that will have a few best practices that can be benchmarked practically by different countries in September 2024. And by December 2024, we are expecting to have the strategy document drafted to be then circulated to you in January 2025. In the strategy document, we will also include the country profile, where we try to give a little bit of descriptive, particularly in the profile of the country on media, on the digital media of channels in terms of outreach and dissemination in relation particularly to the public campaign and public awareness efforts. And then we would like to get your feedback and review to make sure the information that we put in the strategy document is accurate. Once we review that and once we receive your feedback, we will circulate the strategy document by February 2025. And there might be a question why this one matters, why this context matters. There are two contexts that we would like to draw your attention to. First, on the international context, there is a need for tools to support parties, particularly in conducting outreach and consultation with stakeholders, especially the private sectors as the main users of POPs, to ensure their participation in the management of POPs, because without which we won't be able to really run it and to provide the accurate information, data collection, and throughout until the end of the implementation. Provision of specific guidance and assistance for dissemination, outreach, and private sector engagement, and to compile examples of knowledge management and information sharing strategies. In terms of national context, there is an obligation from the COP context for all parties to actually comply with it, and the country's success in developing, reviewing, and updating NIPS requires an effective means to engage with a wider group of stakeholders. So Another point that and I would like to emphasize here, that why it matters and what matters is particularly referring to the budget to manage POPs that will be highly encouraged to allocate, particularly to consider running the activities under stakeholder engagement and outreach, both in relevant stakeholders and public. So we would like to encourage you to include this element to your action plan. Before we dive in a little bit more into the specific activities, there is some context or descriptive that will be relevant to understand what is stakeholder engagement. This context, particularly under NIPS, engagement refers to the approach to gather input or contribution from stakeholders towards the NIPS inventory and development of an action plan, implementation or dissemination, and monitoring and evaluation of NIPS update. But it doesn't stop at there, because we have another context, which is outreach. That encompasses a range of activities conducted by individuals and organizations to raise awareness about an issue, in this case, particularly on POPs, and encourage others to engage in promoting it. And this process includes education that is relevant to stakeholders about the problem to spark their interest in spreading this awareness. Next is the public as the general audience, as one of the key elements to increase their awareness as well. So it refers to the process of educating the general public, raising their understanding of potential risks and informing them about how to minimize their exposure of POPs, and most critically, their understanding about health. One of the key party obligations under Article 10 of Stockholm Convention is to educate the public on the dangers of POPs to their health and the environment. It is critical to create this strategy with bearing in mind that public is also the key element in that, and aimed at increasing their awareness coupled with the proposed action plan and performance indicator by working together with the executing agencies and responsible ministries. So as mentioned, we have prepared the strategy outline. So this is the structure that we're aiming to get. First, we do the introduction and what it means to have a strategy in outreach with the right context within the international, the national, and the reference of why it matters. Then followed by the methodology. At the moment, we use this consultation as one of the key methodologies to gather information and gather inputs from your site. And alongside, we will also have a desk research. We have started the desk research particularly to learn about your media landscape, about how you run a campaign on public awareness, on different literature, and also most importantly, we go through all your NIPS reports that some of you have submitted, especially from the recent one, so that we understand the situation to start a baseline. We have the country profile and regional summary. In total, we'll have 6 regional strategies that will be tailored with country profiles added into each one of them. Then we have the objectives of the strategy and what is engagement in the context of NIPS, who are the stakeholders involved in the process, how will we achieve our core objective, particularly in the dissemination and outreach, stakeholder engagement, public awareness, with the key messages that we can use to deliver all this information. And last but not least, of course, most importantly, to add the best practice and case studies from project countries. So to start our discussion today, I would like to share these challenges that have been shared by some of our colleagues from different countries, but also to get this reference from several UNEP documents and UNEP guidance to really refer what we are trying to address and to find the solution for. First, maybe this is something that is quite familiar to some of you. For example, general lack of awareness of POPs and their danger among decision makers and other stakeholders. Lack of common information platforms, so there is no open access where people can easily find information and instruction, and a lack of legislative framework that dictate the standards for information sharing. There is sometimes also the lack of active engagement, poor cooperation and coordination among relevant stakeholders. There is insufficient human and financial resources for outreach to a large number of stakeholders. But of course, with the human resource constraints and the financial resources that is unavailable, it will be extremely challenging to really execute and create a roadmap alongside. Lack of capacity and resources to monitor compliance at border entry points and to identify and test chemicals, mixtures, products, and waste that actually is shared, particularly relevant to trade on this. Other challenges also include lack of or limited access to training for custom officers, and in some cases, not enough human resources for effective custom control. So there has been no knowledge on how to really distinguish this chemical and POPs materials, and no capacity building opportunities to these relevant stakeholders. And then we sometimes come across a lack or limited coordination among the different key government actors, and challenges building and retaining a capable team due to frequent changes on Stockholm Convention national focal points, team members, and trained personnel. And we also sometimes come across rotation within the national governments, and then we don't have the opportunities to hand over information and tasks and to share, reshare, and redistribute the roles and responsibility, and so lack of funding to retrain new personnel. There has been also low level of trust from the industry in government actions on POPs and chemical management in general. And this particularly challenging. Why? Because we won't be able to retrieve the information. There might be some resistance. There might be some don't feeling that they have to contribute to the request to provide the information as requested by the government. So the trust really has to be built from the outset, from the very beginning, even before the planning of action plan. Limited or no disclosure about industrial operations, which impedes proactive action on potential pollution. And also limited or no financial resources allocated by the industry for environmental protection. So this hasn't come to their attention, or this hasn't become their priority moving forward. So these are on some of the challenges, but there are also others that was also raised, including the language barriers to ensure inclusivity and outreach to relevant multi-stakeholders, the absence of local approach, so maybe the language of understanding, and then it doesn't really speak to the actual situation and condition of the local context, and then insufficient availability and access to information on POPs to the public. So people are not really aware the importance of getting rid or phase out the POPs, and poor communication, internet access, and mobile phone penetration. So there hasn't been any equity in facilitating information sharing and exchange, as well as lack of cooperation and networking with the global and global and regional community. So to address all those challenges, before finding the solution to make sure the activities will address all the issues that were raised, there are key enablers that may help increase stakeholder engagement. What are they? So these are what we've proposed to you. First, garner stakeholders' buy-in, and then to make sure people are persuaded to be participating the effort together collectively and coordinating the same towards the same objective. Second, increase understanding of environmental challenges and human health, and share responsibilities across multi-stakeholders. Next is raising national awareness of the Stockholm Convention and new POPs, because otherwise they won't understand why this is necessary. Next is building country ownership among national government and other stakeholders. So with the ownership, people will feel that they are part of the community. We are all here together, and to really fight for the common solution. Support collaborative efforts, particularly with the private sector, while assuring confidentiality. This can be emphasized and enforced from the very beginning when they are invited to participate at the meeting, and then for focus groups or any survey, there should be a disclaimer where the government or the key stakeholders would mention that how to address and how to treat confidential information, so that we can actually create such trust, how they are not going to be misused or circulated in a wrong way. And then we also have to ensure provision of the reporting mechanism standards. So we have a standardized mechanism. We have the standardized form, so there is no confusion and they will be guided by the right procedure. Support a collaborative reporting platform so that we know where to go to get all the information, but also to contribute to information accurately. Create and increase awareness through regular information dissemination, and integrate global exchange and capacity building with the GFC. And lastly, integrate outreach strategy and action plans into the overall NIPS update strategy. The outreach and engagement efforts require all this ongoing cumulative process that enables relationship, trust to build and strengthen over time. So who are the stakeholders that can be engaged? So first, of course, the national governments with responsibilities tied to other relevant international and regional agreements, particularly on the chemicals-related agreements. Other relevant ministries and agencies, for example, the environment, finance, agriculture, industry, trade, transport, public health, and others. And of course, when we're talking about engagement, when we're talking about outreach, that will be encouraged to communicate and to reach out to the Ministry of Information and Communication. And then government official responsible for the Rotterdam and Basel Convention or other relevant multilateral environment agreements, producers and or importers, environmental authorities, chemical registration authorities, chemical-related trade and association, and manufacturers and user organization, larger enterprise using the POP, recycling and end-of-life facilities. We cannot forget the roles of the public interest non-governmental organization regarding chemicals and waste issues. And we also need to engage with relevant environmental and nature conservation organization, academics, social organization, women's group, and industrial, commercial, agriculture, and labor organizations such as trade unions. We have international environmental organizations to provide guidance and assistance. We have science community, relevant research and educational institution and consumer, and of course, last but not least, general public. So there will be probably something else that is beyond these relevant stakeholders, but I would encourage you to share how we can reach out and identify the right element, the right component, and the right stakeholders to really contribute to this. And then on the outreach, what does it do and what do we expect to do? We allow for communication of risk from hazardous chemicals through labeling, printed information, and education. Secondly, we also provide through the outreach public access to information about hazardous chemicals and associated risk. Also, we facilitate the exchange of information between agencies, governments, and sectors of industry, as well as other stakeholders. And for the public awareness, it will be able to generate awareness about POPs and their impact on human health among the exposed audience. And the aim particularly is to really influence behavior towards minimizing the propagation and exposure of POPs among the exposed audience and the wider general public. So by changing the behavior, there are some POPs related from UPOPs or others that can also create minimizing the use of POPs, as well as pushing for the consumer demands, especially on the consumer products. And then we can communicate alternatives and potential solutions whenever applicable, and to engage audiences in a movement towards minimizing the use of POPs and POPs containing articles. So when we're talking about interaction with stakeholders, what do we mean by it? We can contact relevant stakeholders to collect the POPs data, to share the data, to validate, and then to obtain feedback from them. Apart from awareness raising intervention that we've mentioned multiple times, and also importantly to have educational element intervention. So collecting inventory related data is a multi-step process that can include a tiered approach.
Durante la elaboración del inventario es un enfoque con muchos pasos, muchos niveles.
Provide information from the industry. And the stakeholders should be contacted early in the process during the development of POPs, inventories. Engaging stakeholders at the initial stages ensures their input can be considered thoroughly, helping to tailor the inventory process to address local concerns and needs effectively. So effective stakeholder communication involves clear, concise and honest exchanges to gather diverse insights and foster cooperation. So this approach helps us in accurately assessing the presence and impact of POPs, leading to more effective management and regulation strategies. For example, for Tier 1, we can inform stakeholders about the scope of inventory and the background of the Stockholm Convention, communicate the arrangement for the treatments of confidential business information. On Tier 2, when the data collection needs to be focused on the main sectors, a more detailed information can be collected through interviews, surveys, site visits, and many others. And the last tier, when in-depth inventory can also include using analytical methods, we can again use the interviews, surveys, and site visits to obtain their feedback and or validate the data. And contacting stakeholders after inventory process, there are 3 steps here. During the action plan, we can contact relevant stakeholders for information sharing, resource allocation, and stakeholders engagement. On the implementation of NIPS, we can do the outreach to various stakeholders for information sharing through the CAP study, which is knowledge, attitude, and practices, raising awareness through campaigns and using educational intervention. And during the monitoring and implementation of NIPS, we can contact relevant stakeholders to obtain feedback for effectiveness of the plan. And we'd like to share with you the list of guidance to be consulted here. And in addition to what has been mentioned also by Carla in the early intervention. And these are all will give a really good context and understanding on how to run the inventory and with the support of the stakeholder engagement. So I guess that's that from my side, and we can jump to the discussion. Let me just send it back to you, Anastasia.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Let me run our first poll and our first question. Okay, I hope everyone can see the screen. So we know that we have some Spanish-speaking countries, so we tried to include some translation into Spanish, and I hope it's quite accurate because it was done by the automated translation, but I really hope it works well. So please feel free to answer the question. And the first question is, how important do you think stakeholders' engagement and public awareness is for outreach and information dissemination when you develop and when you review and update your NIPS? So it's extremely important, or it's very important, moderately important, slightly important, or not important at all. So please feel free to answer this question. And the next question is, what are the key challenges your organization or your ministry or your agency is facing regarding your outreach and information dissemination efforts during updating, developing, reviewing your NIPS? So what are the key challenges? And among the key challenges, we put here some of the options. So it's lack of knowledge or expertise, lack of financial resources, could be lack of common information platform, or insufficient human resources and unavailable dedicated personnel. So we know that most of the ministries and agencies, they're very loaded with different works, and Stockholm Convention is not the only one. So unavailable standard operating procedures, lack of national coordination and engagement with relevant stakeholders, could be limited access to training opportunities, or low level of trust from the, for example, private sector or industry, which cause limited disclosure of POPs data for your inventory, or it could be insufficient public information about POPs. Another option is lack of regional or global cooperation, or any other. And if you have any other idea or you want to add some option to these questions, please feel free to drop your suggestion in the chat. We will also consider this. So we have 9 answers out of 27 participants, and we really hope that more people can participate and answer the questions, because this questions, they would fit the strategy itself, as Stephanie mentioned, because we've tried to develop country profiles, but it's also very important for us to understand the national context and the challenges, and it could be so different country by country. So it would be really great to have some of the inputs from you. Okay, we have 51% of participants who responded so far, so 15 out of 27. Okay. Shall we end the poll, Stephanie? What do you think? Or shall we
Yes.
wait a little bit more?
Yes, we can give maybe 10 more seconds. And from the answers, it's really good to hear that this is very important or extremely important. There is a moderately important, but it's I think the minority there, but we can see the majority would say extremely important. And then the second thing, that the key challenges, we can see that the top results are insufficient human resources and available dedicated personnel. So without the dedicated personnel, I think it will be really impossible to run such roadmap. It doesn't matter how beautiful and how ideal this plan is created. If we don't have any insufficient human resources, that will be a challenge. So that's something that to keep in mind. We have a dedicated person, dedicated coordinator to really run it, maybe together with other coordinators, different agencies. And the second, the second top answers, there is
lack of
financial resources, which also similar to our first group this morning. The financial resources is second top answer. Of course, without any budget, without any funding, this is not possible to run different activities as we plan. So as I mentioned earlier, it will be really, really important to put budget and to allocate something at the beginning. And it is also then followed by, I think, lack of national coordination as the third top answer, 44%, 8 people answer this out of 18 contribution. So lack of national coordination and engagement with relevant stakeholders. So this is something that we're trying to achieve here. And of course, all these challenges more or less have their difficulties really to address, but these top 3 that really created the impression.
Let me stop sharing, Stephanie, but I also wanted to add something on the financial resources, because also in the first session we had this consultation with other countries from different regions, and they also emphasized that lack of finance and allocation in the budget is quite a factor that prevents them from successfully engaging with the stakeholders and also running some huge awareness campaigns, also increasing the some educational interventions. And it's really important that all of the agencies have some communication internally between, so that there is an understanding where this budget could be, because it may be not in the budget of the Ministry of Environment, but it can be in the budget of the Ministry of Public Health. So it's really important that also the agencies have a conversation with each other to see some avenues for collaboration and to fund these activities together. And over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Anastasia. So we shall then move on to the next question here. What is the current state of the stakeholder engagement? But first, I would like to maybe throw the polling before we talk about the current state. So let me see if I can do that. If not, then I will try to do this. Okay. Would you mind throwing that for me, Anastasia? I think because of I share this screen. Okay, thank you. So the question here is on what can be seen by the national government as the drivers of change to get the appropriate level of stakeholder input. So you can select more than one here. First is the policies. Is it really important? Is it going to help in our efforts? Second, the behavioral change through greater education and awareness. And then next one, green and sustainable chemistry education and innovation. The next one is strong coordination across government agencies, and then regular and open access communication with all required stakeholders. And the next one is information clarity and transparency from the government to gain stakeholders' trust. And then free access to information to all parties and financing mechanism. Also consumer or public demand. So all this, among this, what can be seen, what can you consider as the drivers of change to get their inputs? Is it policies, behavioral change, green chemistry education and innovation, coordination, access to communication, information clarity and transparency, free access to all information to all parties, and financing mechanism. So far we have 10 out of 27, and 1/3 of our participants have answered. Would be nice, let's give another 10 seconds to answer to this polling, and it will be interesting to understand. For the time being, the most important one is mentioned and selected as per polling with 55% participation. 15 people have already answered. The most important one that I can see here is strong coordination across government agencies. So let me end the poll here and then share the result. So we can see 62% have answered. Strong coordination is at the top of the priority, and then followed by behavioral change through greater education and awareness. This is really, really important, and this is good to really acknowledge that. And that one of the educational elements can be included perhaps in the education academic curricula. And then the next one, the most important one, is financing mechanism. So this top 3. So I don't know if there is anyone else who would like to raise that, any ideas or experience from their end, but it's pretty much it's pretty straightforward to see that strong coordination is one of the most important key enablers to make sure that our efforts is going to be successful. Let me go back to our question earlier. What is the current state of the stakeholder engagement or gathering inputs in the process of POPs inventory development and implementation? I don't know if there is anyone who would like to share. I understand that our colleague would like to, from Bahamas and Dominica, would like to share something. We can raise it now, or I would like to invite our colleague, I think Eustacia, in case you would like to step in and share your perspective on the current state of the stakeholder engagement or gathering inputs in the process of POPs inventory development and implementation, or if there is any other colleagues who would like to share their perspective.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Please go ahead.
Thank you. All right. So my name is Eustacia Jennings. I am the national team lead for the NIPS update for the Bahamas project. And I've been working on the project for about a year. Prior to this, I had been involved in the Minamata initial assessment updates. So we're into our stakeholder engagement, and many of the challenges that you mentioned is some that we're facing here in the Bahamas also with our data collection and also stakeholder engagement. Also what you said as some of the top priorities also that came up in the poll we're also experiencing. So I think one of the one of the biggest things I think or issue would be the lack of coordination and using even though we use consultants, but I think this may be a detriment to the process because the whole process is very dependent on the consultants, which was the case also for the initial NIP when it was created. And so there's still a knowledge and a gap within the actual government agency responsible for carrying out the NIP. And so what has happened and what we are seeing is that, you know, the NIP and maybe even NIP update, they're done, and then nothing's really done afterwards as it should, because the actual government, the focal points should be the ones really driving it more, so that it is actually sustainable and that things get done. And so what we're seeing now also is stakeholder fatigue. I don't know if that's been mentioned as such, but because we have a limited amount of resources and it's the same major stakeholders that are working on these projects, not just the Stockholm Convention, but Minamata and the Jeff Island, the projects for all chemicals, even on the climate change committees, they're some of the same people. And so the major stakeholders in the agencies, some of them get a little fatigue answering questions, collecting data, coming to meetings. And so that's what we've been seeing a bit. And so it's slow to get responses. And then the quality of the data that we get back sometimes is questionable. So those two are the biggest things that I'm experienced as a consultant on this part of the project, and that other consultants who worked previously on the project have voiced concerns with that. And so even just in producing the NIP or producing the update and collecting the data, it becomes sometimes frustrating, or it drags out because of the lack of responses. Also in the Bahamas, we're kind of unique in some of the other Caribbean islands and some of the other countries because of our archipelago and how it's situated. We have 700 islands, but we have about 30 or so that are populated over a large square footage. So getting to these islands to collect information, so it's not just focused on the information in New Providence or the capital, and it's really it really highlights, or it contains information from the whole Bahamas, is sometimes a challenge given the geography and the lack of budgets, and the time frame also. So encompassing that and trying to tax stakeholders on those, we call them family islands, the islands that are further away from the capital, can be a bit challenging. And so that's another issue that we've been having with developing the POPs inventory and getting into the NIPS update. I think those are some of the major items here in the Bahamas. I don't know if we have from the government side, with the implementation side, they will have to speak on that. But based on our feedback, there's been, you know, slow implementation in some of the areas, just because there's been a lot of turnover and change in personnel and retention of those personnel at the government level. And also even on the National Working Group or the Chemicals Committee, who's actually should take ownership of the implementation and tracking the progress for these conventions and NIPS. And yeah, with that, I think that's it for my input.
Thank you so much, Eustacia. It's really insightful, and it's very good to hear from your side all the feedback and the fact that it's very dependent on the consultant. There is no continuation, the sustainability, and the lack of ownership that really creates a challenge. It sounds like it's just like a loop. And you mentioned about the lack of coordination, and there is also that creates a gap on lack of follow-up after the consultant who is coordinating and then to be passed on from the government perspective to really implement it with the limited stakeholder resources. And the stakeholder fatigue, this is something that we should really include. And there is probably something to think about synchronizing across different agencies, and so that we don't have to really reinvent the wheel or overlapping efforts. And okay, one person will think, like, I've done already this a while back, and why do I have to repeat the same thing to address two different reporting mechanisms, for example? So I think this is pretty much interlinked between the lack of coordination, how to create an ownership across the government and the agencies, and how to really follow up to make sure there is no duplication in terms of effort. So this is probably something definitely that to be addressed on the strategy document. And mentioning about the archipelago, the fact that it's the Caribbean, especially with the status as also as a SIDS, and it's not really easy geographically to collect information, and it's yet more money in comparison to just one island countries, which is probably easier, and also the digital penetration that helps. That probably something that is also not very reliable. So with the geography, in-person meeting, in-person support, it's still very important. So this is something that is perhaps quite lacking given the geography and the time frame and the lack of the budget on that. So I think these are all the challenges that we have to highlight, and lack of responses because of the fatigue itself. I think that is something that we can bring forward. I don't know if there's any other countries would like to propose any other points. Thank you so much, Stacia, for that. But I would like to also invite you later on in case you have some good practices that others, maybe towards the end, that good practice that you probably gathered from your experience from different countries and from your countries, the Bahamas and Dominicas and the Caribbean side. So in the meantime, let's focus on this one. I don't know if there is anything, or Anastasia, you have anything to add on top? If not, we can move on to the next discussion that you can moderate.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Eustacia. And I don't really have anything to add on this, except agreeing on this stakeholders fatigue. And there are so many terms these days as webinars fatigue as well, because there are too many workshops and too many webinars that public officials have to attend. And it's really, it could be actually a factor that would prevent more engagement on the national level as well. Yeah, we can probably move. Oh, okay, I think we have a question from Mr. Martin Scotland. Please go ahead.
I'm afraid we cannot, yeah, sorry.
We cannot hear you, Martin.
Sí, Martin.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Mr. Scotland is mute. I think this probably, he has to unmute his mic.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Scotland, we really cannot hear you. He is unmuted, but probably the microphone doesn't work.
Okay, hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
It seems as if Mr. Scotland is having some difficulties. I am Emmanuel Dubois, part of the team for the Dominica NIP updates. Mr. Scotland was supposed to be the spokesperson this morning, but he's having some challenges. In reference to the challenges, we're faced with the similar challenges as identified by the Bahamas team. And one of the critical areas, lack of public awareness. I believe when we are undertaking such an activity in terms of updating and reviewing a national plan, despite what plan it is, it could be a national census, it could be a survey on health, it could be a survey on fisheries, food and nutrition. there needs to be this public awareness component of it, where the entire public is educated and they are aware of what is taking place. So we have to spend some resources and some time before, during, and even after such an activity to ensure that the people are aware of what is happening, aware of the effects it's going to have on them in terms of the benefits and general public awareness. The media must be informed. There must be media bits every now and then so that the population is aware, and I believe we'll get greater participation. In terms of the stakeholders, we're experiencing the same problem as the Bahamas, stakeholders fatigue. Some stakeholders are not even aware of what is POPs. And when filling the form, you get just minute, unimportant information. And we, as the consultant, must go and sit in with the stakeholders to get clarification, to sit with the stakeholders and go through the questionnaire with the stakeholders, which is time consuming, and human resources is so limited, financial resources is so limited.
Limitados los recursos financieros.
50 stakeholders, and the islands are large. And most times the stakeholders have other pressing activities. At times we have to make several appointments to meet one stakeholder. And despite having a fixed time, upon our arrival, we're faced with a note, sorry, there was an emergency, we're unable to meet with you. So it's very time consuming. Thirdly, the high exchange of key personnel in the ministries. A simple example, in the Ministry of Environment, which is the lead ministry, we had 3 PSs within less than a year time frame. And this affects the process. We have to go in and sit with the new PS, update him or her, and seek his or her cooperation to work with us. So we are faced with similar challenges, and those challenges are time consuming and also financially a constraint to us. The key, it's public education, public awareness, and we have to spend a lot of time and resources in that aspect. Once we can break that barrier, I believe the process can be much more effective and efficient.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for your inputs on this. I'm sorry that Martin Scotland cannot share your perspective, but thank you so much for this 3 points, which is very critical, of course, and thank you for highlighting the importance of the general public awareness. And this is something that we will include in the documents on how important that is to include in the media information about the danger of chemical and how that can affect the health of the community, the health of the people. And so this can start taking an action and try to really integrate in their day-to-day habits and to change their behavior. And understand about the also the stakeholder awareness. So the opening of the open platform to really educate what is POPs and why it is for the Stockholm Convention the obligation for each party to make a report to make sure that the list of the POPs to be phased out and to be to stop and to remove is there, and it is part of the effort for the countries, the whole country, to take action. And the time consuming is also the acknowledged, and I think that can take advantage from the better coordination, a better increase access to human resources and the funding. And the high turnover for 3 times a year, it doesn't help, obviously. By the time it's nearly done, even for the handover, it's time to a new person to take over. So it's not really efficient in a way. Thank you so much for that. And I think there is another input from our other colleague, Fernando Horner. I'll give the floor to you. to Fernando. Yeah.
Sí, buenos días con todos. ¿Se escucha bien? De repente tenemos problemas de
Me
comunicación.
well? I'm not sure if the interpreters can hear me well.
Hola, ¿se escucha? Ok. A ver, voy a tratar de acercar un poco más el micro, disculpen la imagen. Bueno.
Okay, so I know that I would like to say hello to everybody, my greetings to everyone. And here I am working from this team. And so I understand that these challenges are very important as well. And we understand this point about the rotation of personnel with the permanent secretary and the public education and awareness. And these are some of the challenges that we face as well. And we understand also about the language barriers. We need to have this information available in as many languages as possible, especially because this is how we share information. And this is how we can accelerate that outreach and sharing of information. And yes, we also have the same issue in terms of the resources, human and financial. We have the time constraints as well. And so this is a bit of what I wanted to say as well. So yes, the challenges that we face in the creation and the elaboration of these plans. And so yes, I agree with my colleagues. And so we have that political aspect as well with the ministries. And so we need better communication, better education, and increasing that education and awareness. And with this is what I would like to say with regard to our situation. So I agree, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for sharing your perspective. You highlighted also the public education and awareness on communication, increasing the communication and coordination, and also on the language barriers, accelerate outreach and information sharing. So I think this is what we're trying to do to make sure that there is a specific country profile on how to use the media and to include, to really include the education element into the school curricula. So we start from the outset, from when we were young, starting from the community, and also you acknowledge about the lack of time and the human resources and financial issues. So these are the three, I think, like the three prong that is required from the government to really think through how to really allocate the time to really execute on the human resources constraint, how to make sure there is a dedicated personnel, as well as the financial contribution and the budget to be integrated into the action plan. Thank you so much for that input, Fernando. And now let's move on to Silviana Martinez. The floor is yours, Silviana.
Hola, sí. Buenos días para nosotros, no sé, buenas tardes para el resto. Lamento no poder tener...
Morning or good afternoon. I unfortunately cannot have my camera on because my screen is broken. But what I wanted to do was, of course, support what my colleague has said, as well as we have found that there's a way to facilitate this. We know that communication is very difficult with different sectors, but we have found that this situation can be helped sometimes with the method that we have used for different inventories. Sometimes the inventories have been thought of in terms of substances, but not sectors. And this has been a little bit difficult for us because, of course, you want to look at the different impact of different compounds. In a different sector, you have to look at everything separately and not in a more integrated manner. So sometimes you have to do different sets of analyses, and this, of course, requires a lot of effort from our sector. And of course, we have to look at sectors looking at more than one opportunity to contact different sectors in terms of different contaminants. We have to see which ones can impact different sectors. So this exchange needs to be, is more complicated, and we actually need to simplify it a bit. And in various opportunities, there have been a little bit of loss of information. So I think that it's important. I don't know if this is perhaps the environment to present this consideration, but I think is that we need to do a more integrated approach to gathering information from different sectors. There is material, there is information. We, of course, are doing what we can do on each sector. We have found some materials, but we think that this is insufficient to have other to complement what other sectors are providing for us. And that was just my my input, is so that we can continue, working on that, as well as sensitization and being able to do more profound analysis, more designated as well, or more designed for our stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josefina. I think you really underline a profound matters on how to really better coordinate in such an integrated approach. You mentioned several times the sectoral section. There's kind of overlapping, and how to make sure that you address different sectors with also in efficient manner, not overlap, from not to kind of like double or duplicate the efforts. And so it's really difficult for you and also others. All of us here must have experience in the approach to private sector. And there has been lots of information, and that's actually being lost. So that's very unfortunate, because instead we should have, as you mentioned, the method that you've proposed is to have a simplified method, a more efficient manners, and on an integrated approach. So I think we would like to hear more about the simplified method that has been proven successful in your case, in your country's case, and perhaps something that we can learn from, how to really overcome such a situation. And there is also our colleague here, Bridget Hogg, saying, I'm curious as to whether anyone has developed or considered developing a chatbot that stakeholder can engage with to assist in providing guidance and awareness. And this is a really good point in terms of really utilizing technology. Should that be feasible in the countries with a good internet access, and so to enable people to just within their click one click, and then they can get a suitable support. And so this again will go back to the provision of funding and the coordination. So this is a very good use of technology and the use of AI, I believe. And this also is alongside what the global world is trying to go to. So before I think we can move to the next discussion, so that we don't lose too much time. But I would be keen to really invite colleagues to share your perspective, if possible. And Anastasia, can you bring us to the next discussion, please?
Sure. While I'm launching the poll, I just was really surprised with that proposal on developing the chatbot that would educate the stakeholders, because it's very convenient, and it could be quite a good solution in terms, because people are very there are a lot of booklets, there are a lot of leaflets, brochures, but the chatbot is something new and everyone could access with the phone. So it's a great idea, and we'll keep the record of this idea as well when we speak to our colleagues in UNEP and BRS Secretariat. Let me launch the poll now. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
So this is more about the public awareness, and a couple of colleagues, they mentioned today that public awareness is crucial for management of POPs. So we would really like to know, what are the communication channels used in your country to share information about chemicals or POPs, pollution, with the general public? And we truly understand that for sure, like POPs is very specific and it's very technical, and most of the people, even most of the stakeholders don't know what is POPs. So it's very technical. So maybe, and because I'm also coming from the developing country, and I have never remembered that any public agencies have ever streamlined this information about chemical pollution or POPs. And moreover, this chemical pollution is like invisible. So people cannot really see the pollution with their eyes, and they cannot really like see the pollution and also feel the effects of pollution on their health directly right away. So it's very hard, I think, and we would really want to know your perspective in your countries, because also many people mentioned the geographic aspects, that some of the islands are very scattered, and how would government communicate this information about POPs to usual people? So is it newspapers? Is it television? Is it social media channels of public agencies? These days, some of the ministries, they actually have the Instagram channels or Facebook pages to share some news, or maybe it could be social media pages of the influencers, some people in the communities that actually have a lot of subscribers, and maybe through these people, this information can be communicated, or maybe websites of the public agencies. Radio is quite the case. Also schools and educational institutions, or community events, which is quite important in the rural areas especially. So we really encourage you to answer the questions. It's really important for us, because these answers will feed the part of the strategy that is related to the public awareness. And Stephanie, who is working on these strategies, will be coming with some ideas or suggestions or recommendations and tools to address, or key messages to address the general public, to raise the awareness on the chemicals. So it's really important for us to know which channels you are using and which channels you are not using. And the next questions are on the frequency of using all of these communication channels. So how often do you communicate the chemicals information through the newspapers? And 0 means never, and 10 means very frequent, very often. And also, how often is the information about the chemicals communicated through the television? We fully understand that it's probably unlikely to be communicated, because airtime is very expensive. And unless it's some kind of emergency or a matter of very huge pollution somewhere, it probably could go unused, but maybe probably less likely, because the first group today also responded that television is not really well used to communicate the information about chemicals. And also how often the information of the POPs is communicated through the social media. So how active are the agencies, public agencies, on social media on the chemical pollution related topics, or maybe it could be just environmental topics as well. And the next question is, how often the information about POPs communicated through the social media of influencers? So is it never, or sometimes maybe, or very often? And how often is the information about POPs communicated through the websites? It really depends, because all this social media and websites, it all pertains to the internet penetration. And we know that like big cities, they for sure have this very good internet connectivity, and maybe many people may have mobile devices, but when it comes to the rural areas, it's really interesting how the situation is in there. And also how often the information about the chemicals communicated through the radio. Radio still remains quite popular, and it's very accessible, and radio time is not that expensive as television time. So maybe some radio podcasts or radio programs could be the case in your country. Really appreciate your response. And I would say that the last one is how often this information on chemicals is communicated through the schools or educational institutions. I'm not sure if there is any environmental, maybe there is like a general environmental topic subject integrated in the curriculum for sure in the schools, but in my memories, from my school memories, I do not really recall talking about chemicals. This is something that people still do not know in my country, for example. And the last one is how often do you communicate this POPs information through the community events? So maybe through some community events or holidays or some national celebrations and other events, or maybe Environmental Day or other events. That could be the case. I think we have 12 respondents or 13 responses. It takes quite a while to answer all of these questions, but it's really important for us to understand because we've been trying to find some of the data in the internet on how well these channels are used by the countries, and it's quite there is a scarcity of the data on this. Okay, Stephanie, what do you think? Shall we wait a little bit or?
Yes, maybe 5 more seconds, and we can see here the website has been used most of the time by our colleagues. So digital media has shown that it's been utilized more than the traditional media, and then social media channels is the second to follow up to follow the website of public agencies, and also on school and education institution following the digital media aspect, which is really, really good to know because, of course, you start from the roots of education, not just from the community, from the formal education in schools. And also we can see newspapers is quite low in there as a traditional media. We can see, I think that's a trend globally. Television is still there, but it's lacking, depending perhaps on the use and who use it, on the demography of the age and where they are. And there is also, Amara mentioned here on the chat, I would say that information about POPs and for many environmental topics is mostly shared when there is a project is being undertaken by a country. The project is completed, disseminated of information dies down. So it's not really sustainable, and there is no legacy that is contributing on the long term, and especially on projects come on board. So yeah, that is really good to know. So the duration of the project will determine how long the conversation will go on. So I guess we can end the poll, Anastasia, and then just share very briefly before we move on to the next discussion.
Yeah, I've just shared the results.
Yeah.
I hope everyone can see this. So this is just the way you described before. And let me stop sharing the screen. And shall we go to the next poll, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I think I will go to the very last poll on this question. What are the currently existing modalities? So this is our final poll today. Before I would like to open the floor to any colleagues who would like to share maybe some good practice that others can learn from or the benchmark. But first, the next question is on what are the currently existing modalities or methods to communicate and interact with the stakeholders during inventory process. So in this case, we refer to the industry players, business association, and all relevant stakeholders who would like to be invited to contribute to data collection. The options include awareness campaign for industry-specific stakeholders. Second, workshop and capacity building with relevant stakeholders. Then regular stakeholder consultation. Then survey or questionnaire for data collection and inputs. There is stakeholder feedback sessions and creation of working groups or technical advisory groups, and perhaps maybe a steering committee that is created at the outset. Information dissemination system and standardized reporting formats, or any other that you would like to propose on top of this element. So the question again is, what are the currently existing modalities or methods to communicate and interact with the relevant stakeholders during the inventory process? Awareness campaign for industry stakeholder, workshop and capacity building with relevant stakeholders, regular consultations, survey or questionnaire for data collection and inputs, stakeholder feedback session, creation of working groups or technical advisory groups, or any steering committee, information dissemination system and standardized reporting formats, or any others you would like to propose. We have 11 colleagues who have voted for this polling. Anastasia, if you could take off for just 1 second, I will be back in 1 second.
Sure. So we have 15 colleagues who responded so far. We'll wait for around 30 seconds. And while we are waiting, I actually wanted to compliment again back to the Bridget Hawk's comment on the chatbot. GGKP is actually developing online courses on several topics, and with this online courses, we can share this with you in the next quarter, in quarter 3. I believe we are in quarter 3 already. Okay, so this quarter, and I hope that these courses can be a good practice for education and also for educational purposes for new stakeholders, or in the cases when, as many colleagues mentioned, there is a high turnover in the agencies and some teams. So whenever the new people are coming, they would be able to go to these online courses and check learn something new about the POPs. So far, it's on the POPs alternatives and also UPOPs, especially in the industrial processes and also open burning processes, and also NIPS priorities in financing. So these are the priority courses that will come this quarter, but we are happy and open to any suggestions from your end on maybe some additional topics.
So we can see here, Anastasia, maybe we can end the poll. We have 57% participated, and we have the top answer here is survey or questionnaire, and that actually explains the simplicity, the format. So to make sure that people don't feel burdened with the time required, as perhaps I mentioned earlier. And then there is also a workshop and capacity building with relevant stakeholders to really provide the insights and knowledge on POPs and how to collect and why is it important. And then there is also the third top answer is creation of working groups. And this was actually mentioned in our group session in the morning. And in the preparation, or even before they started the inventory, the plan for the inventory, they created a steering committee or technical advisory group to really start engaging with the targeted stakeholders from the outset. And then at the same time, there is also stakeholder feedback sessions. We can see 7 people answer that, 44%, which is great, because without feedback, we will never know. And then also that creates transparency and understanding across different stakeholders. And we can also read from our colleagues here. Maybe you've noticed, Anastasia, that it may be more effective to identify one person or team to serve as long-term information and outreach source, because that is true, because this is an ongoing effort with the regular COP happens every now and then. So there's always an update, and we cannot treat this as an ad hoc basis. We cannot even treat it also as Amara mentioned. That happens only during the project, right? So the long-term and dedicated person that might help in addressing the situation, the turnover, okay, there can be a turnover for a particular element or component or certain stakeholder, but at the same time, we have the more permanent committee to really address the situation. But also good to underline that for the POP team, the name is also very catchy, POP team or Captain Chemicals, that has to be separated from any political group, which is really good to highlight, and it is really important to acknowledge that. So, and also in presenting the information, this is something that also very key to make sure people are attracted and to really turn their head to really understand and to learn. The information is factual, but fun to engage the community with the right language, with the right tone, with the right length and duration. So I guess that is really, really good inputs. And I think that was the last poll. I would like to, I hope you don't mind for us to ask for maybe a couple more minutes, if there is any colleague who would like to share some practices from different countries, from different regional, from their experience, if there's anything that we can learn from you, some good practice or best practices from different country. I don't know if Eustacia, you have witnessed any good practice that we can learn from, also because Siflana mentioned, okay, there is some simplified method that we can try to engage with the industry sector, because it is already very difficult to reach out to them. But once we get the simplified method, and then to make sure that there is no duplication of efforts, that makes it a bit more approachable. I don't know if there is anyone from our colleagues who would like to share their perspective. We would also like to invite perhaps after this for any narrative, any example, in case we run out of time, we can also invite you to share by email, or later on we can also contact you bilaterally. Yes, Eustacia, please.
Okay, yeah, so there are some good things and some suggestions to make it easier for conducting these inventories. I think I speak on behalf of Dominica. A lot of time was spent just creating the surveys. That took a lot of time. If there were pre-made surveys that we could utilize, that would help, in questionnaires, that we could just tweak, that would save a lot of time and frustrations, and also in the technology that we need, like Adobe or in the forms. I know in the initial NIP that we did, one of the consultants and the team that did that, they actually developed an app to collect data, and they just sent the stakeholders, et cetera, were able to access the app and just fill out information there or download information, et cetera. But that was that consultant and their work, and it did not stay in the project. So now the next consultant has to reinvent or come up with something else. So even with another project that we're doing with the waste stockpiles, which is another thing that we can do, it overlaps. We have an app also, it's tied to ArcGIS survey, where we can go to a location and enter information on that location and stakeholder, any kind of responses, and then tie that to any chemicals or
respuestas de las partes interesadas, y podemos recopilar toda esta información y toda la...
You could see exactly what they have. So it's using technology, but again, that's in that project with that consultant, and it's not necessarily made available to other consultants on other projects so that we could utilize the same tool. Now we have to go and reinvent the wheel, and we may not have the technical expertise or the money and the budget to do that sort of thing. And so with that project, I'm privy to that because I'm actually working on both projects, which is rare. But because of limited resources internationally and expertise, I'm I guess it's good that I'm working on both projects because I'm able to use, use information from both projects because it's the same stakeholders in both projects that we have to actually contact. And so we're able to actually combine efforts and do a collaboration instead of going back to the same stakeholders twice. Unfortunately, sometimes the timing of the projects were a little off, so we still had to go back twice. So making sure that you collaborate as much as possible between different projects. Like if you know that the Minimodic Convention, your NIP for that has to be updated and also the POPs that year, why not combine it and have one consultant do both, or at least share information so that you're not, 2 months you're going for POPs information and in the next 2 months you're coming back to the same stakeholders for mercury information, and try and make sure it's the integrated chemicals approach. I think that the UNEP is trying to go for, but that would help a lot, making sure that consultants know who is working on which projects, that they have access to each other and have access and freedom to share that information between the projects. I think that would help greatly.
Thank you so much, Eustacia. It's really useful and valuable inputs from your side. And I think mapping across projects and contacts to avoid duplication and improve collaboration to make sure we have an optimized result rather than having a fatigue stakeholder effect. So I guess the mapping across projects and to understand, so there is an index which project is doing what and who to contact to, and then to make sure there is no kind of invention of the wheel, and also to have everything simplified and efficiency, also using the technology. Thank you for mentioning the app. That's probably something that we can also include in the potential solution for those which are feasible in the context of technology advancement. And the RGIS survey is something very, very interesting. We gather information by location to record responses. So these are all the 3 or 4 key elements that definitely can be benchmarked by other areas as well. And thank you, Eustacia. Let me also now hand over to Fernando Horna. Please, the floor is yours.
Ok, gracias. Gracias por el pase. Sí, queremos mencionar también de la
We would like to mention also for the project in Peru, with respect to the stakeholders and their engagement for the data collection and the development of the plans. And so we have these ideas as well that can facilitate or make these processes easier, and to increase this collaboration with the relevant stakeholders. And so we must have this follow-up, so after information is shared, to make it more efficient. And having this collaboration and coordination between the different mechanisms and project personnel. This is something that would definitely help. So yes, this information sharing and making it more efficient using technology is extremely important. And for the production of material as well in Peru. And so with regard to that, through using technology, through using these efficient mechanisms, this is how we would be able to facilitate it. And so we need greater will. We need this as well. And so through working together, this is how we would be able to create these more efficient systems. and having that stakeholder engagement. And so, yes, we would just like to indicate that having that greater support, supporting the people who are responsible and who are engaged in these processes. And also, I would like to mention that this collaboration with the ministries as well, with the in terms of these national plans as well, having their engagement and participation, you know, for the environmental ministries, health ministries, etc. And this is how we would be able to have the COPS inventories, having this information be shared as well. And so certainly, yes, just understanding again, and to reiterate this, the importance of technologies and the collaboration and coordination mechanisms to be able to facilitate these projects and making the processes more simple to avoid this stakeholder fatigue. And lastly, I don't want to take too much time. This exchange of information between the different parties that are involved. This, we have to make the processes more simple. And we can share, you know, the plans, the steps, the results, all of the information, who the level of participation as well, the different steps of the processes, what stage people are in the plans. You know, the role of each person as well. Everybody has a role to play, etc. So these are the things that I wanted to mention and just reiterate as well, having that stakeholder engagement and their interest as well, and the collaboration and coordination. And in this way, we should be able to have to garner greater results. And so this is what I wanted to mention, and I wanted to thank everyone for this space where we would be able to share our perspectives and such.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for sharing your experience with project in Peru. And I would start with what you mentioned, the greater will. So with the greater will and greater will to collaborate, and you reiterated what Eustacia has proposed in terms of simplify the method and to really tweak in a way that it addresses everyone's interest, and also to have, I think I can summarize in a way that we need an access to all information, for access to exchange information, to create a dashboard, to really understand what is everyone's role, what is everyone's responsibility, the level of participation on which stage, the step-by-step guidance, so people will understand those who actually participate, who are taking part in the process will understand their perspective and what is expected from their end. And also you highlighted the collaboration with the relevant ministry from the environment, from the health ministry, and their participation as well. So there is a need to really provide support for people who are responsible. And the key is also to follow up. So it doesn't mean just to show up once and then after that, that's it, my task is done. But then we again refer back to the hub, the information hub, where there is also possibility of mapping across different stakeholders, mapping different agencies, also in terms of data collection. So they understand where they're at, where is it the progress. So they're basically, there is also the importance of the benefits actually to gain their trust and their perspective of ownership. So we are all part in it together. So I guess that is the key point, and technology is also very important in this sense. So I guess those are in line with what our colleagues were mentioning earlier. Thank you so much for your inputs. We will make sure to integrate this into the strategy documents. And some of the points that you've mentioned today were not yet included. So of course, this is very invaluable for us to hear from your perspective, and also what is it on the ground, what is it on the field that you're really facing. So I hope with our conversation today, we can gather and summarize what is needed and the step-by-step. And we will summarize this today's discussion, and we'll circulate them the minutes and the discussion summary with the result of the polls as well by maybe in a couple of weeks by email. And you are more than welcome to reach out to us with more inputs, with questions, with also concerns as well. And if there is also a request to do a bilateral with us to get more inputs to provide contribution, you are more than welcome. We invite you to do so. So let me now pass on to Anastasia. So I think we can close today's session. Thank you to everyone who contributes.
Yeah, that's indeed a very great opportunity, and it was a great chance to meet all the countries. I think it's our first time to talk, because we normally do engage through the webinars where people cannot actually speak and they cannot share their insights, and it was really great. I think it's a beginning of good practice, and we may consider continuing these practices, engaging with the smaller groups of countries in smaller sessions, but where everyone can share and speak and learn from each other. Once again, as Stephanie mentioned, we will summarize the meeting minutes and circulate them as soon as we can after this session. We are also having another session with another group of Francophone African countries and also some European countries later this week. So we'll be sharing all these meeting minutes after we finish the consultations. Thank you very much to our executing agencies, to our project countries for your participation, to also the consultants teams, and for sure, many thanks to our interpreters for supporting this session. That was amazing. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.